So I have kind of a thought as to this week in common sense. And I'm Paul Jacob, of course, Timothy Verkula. And
That's me. That's not you're not also called Timothy Verkula.
that's right. That's right. I'm limited. It's so limiting in this world to just be one person at a time. But here's my thought. This week is about trust. And on Monday, we really discuss whether we can trust the deep state, aliens. Maybe they're right. One, the other, maybe neither. Tuesday, we look at whether we can trust big tech, big social media, big science. Wednesday, we look at whether we can trust state legislatures, in particular Idaho. And of course, that's almost laughable because no one really has any question there. Anyway, on Thursday, we talk about whether we can trust the courts, whether we can trust big celebrity stars, and then on Friday, we're back to the deep state, back to big lack of intelligence or big intelligence with the NSA and so on, and back to big media with Tucker Carlson, who, arguably is on the other side of most of the big media, but is still big media, and whether we can trust him. So it's all about trust, and regular listeners will probably kind of know what the yes/no answer, which side of that coin we're likely to come down on. But let's not prejudge it. Let's do it.
Okay. So I'll run the music right now. We begin the podcast.
What about the marching band? You always say, you're going to run but we never get the marching band. We never get the crowd noise.
Yeah,
a laugh
use a Japanese string synth. That's the music, is some weird Japanese string synth. We could choose something else, but I think we'd have to be a very different sounding theme music.
Yeah, I like the music. I'm just
it was the first thing that came to me a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. We've been doing this 2 years now. Is that right?
Is that right? Seems like
just 1 year.
I think it's just a year.
Okay.
And sooner or later we're going to get better and better at it. I'm convinced.
Yeah, I think so.
But Monday's commentary, E.T.
send money.
Yes. And really, the commentary is twofold. One is to look at kind of the history of UFOs, which present a picture of our government not telling us the truth, not leveling with us, and not just hiding information, but oftentimes giving us disinformation, telling us things that, or alluding to things, or pretending that things are such a way that they are not. And so it's a real problem. And one of the interesting things, they came out, of course, and we've talked about this on other podcasts and done a number of commentaries about UFOs. And one of the things that they came out fairly, authoritatively, not to jump to Tuesday's script, but authoritatively, they came out and said, these are real things. They are physical objects. They are not, what do you call it? I've lost the word, but not optical illusions. They're not tricks in the sky because of light bending or whatever. They are real physical objects that move in such a way that we just don't have technology that allows us to propel things in the sky in that way, at those speeds, with that sort of agility, so on and so on.
Or officially we don't have it, and they say they don't have access to it. That was sort of the deal. Though something that I didn't show you that came out afterwards was a leaked memo about the classified briefing that were given to some select representatives and senators. And the government basically then came out and said they were studying all the things that make up what could be UFOs. They're studying those things, and they have some technology. But this is the funny part. According to this leaked memo, They've been experimenting with this technology. Anti-gravity, for instance. They talk about anti-gravity technology, which is awfully weird when you think about it. We're not supposed to be able to even do that according to the physics that we're sort of taught officially. And that's been done around Area 51 in near Tonopah, Nevada. But nowhere else. They insist nowhere else. And these events that have been recorded and talked about have been occurring at sea mainly and at military bases.
Right.
So that's an interesting part of the deal. But the thing I like about your Monday piece, maybe the best, is the footnote. Because after talking about this report,
yes,
the very same thing that the current report says was said in 1947 by a general of the United States government.
Which was one of the first times that someone came forward and said, hey, this is what's going on. And so
he didn't say it publicly. That was to another general, and it's a leaked memo. It's never been repudiated by the government. It's never been confirmed by the government. It's generally believed to be an actual memo. There's almost no one doubts that it's an actual memo. And what it says in the memo is just bizarre, because it basically says this is a real thing.
Right.
Which is what Jacques Vallée, the French scientist, has said, that these are real objects. Now, he also says that they're weird and they're disturbing. That's something I've been reading in the last year or so, and that's one of the things that I sometimes wonder. They're telling us lies mainly because they don't think we can handle it. But most people they're ignoring all the last 3 years of talking about UFOs. I think people can handle it.
Right.
Whatever the it is, and I'm not sure what the it is. But Vallée says it's very weird, by the way, that these are not just normal events. It's not like you think just aliens. It's not what you expect when you think of an alien encounter. It's weird. They're always weird, is what he says.
It's part of the problem is any scenario that you think of. Okay, this isn't aliens. It's that somebody has this technology, our government, another government. Well, that doesn't quite make sense, because you'd think they'd want to show their advantage to take advantage. And then, of course, if our government has it and is keeping it secret, I don't really like that so much either. If it is aliens, that's pretty scary. I mean, maybe they're nice aliens like E.T., but maybe they're not. Maybe they're the aliens from Independence Day, and those weren't very nice aliens at all. So it is a little bit scary. I think the other part of Monday's script, Monday's commentary, was the ending. And to bring us all back to the cold, hard reality of Washington, which is that the main thrust of this report was, we need more money. We need more money to look into this. And we need money maybe to get back to the Pentagon, and we need money for, anyway, they always need money. So that tells you that, at least in some ways, life is normal.
Yeah, that's very, very, very much the case. I should mention that this week we've had 2 cases where the thought of the day sort of linked to the article. And for this article, I did put a long section of the Twining memo as the thought. Yes,
and it's very interesting. And folks can go and see that. It was one of those things, most of these commentaries are 250, 300 words. So we have to kind of boil it down. And of course, that quote's probably 100 or 150 words alone. But this is fascinating stuff. And it is interesting to know that what our government just told us is something that we can see somebody was saying in 1947. So tells you something.
Yeah, that's progress. We've caught up to 1947. The government has caught up to 1947.
That's right. Well, I don't know about that. I'm sure there's a few things that happened before 47 they still haven't told us. But, Tuesday, speaking of authorities, we had authoritative. And that is because about a week ago, I learned. I caught a little snippet of Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about a report in the National Pulse that talked about uh, Google having censored and actually I should back that up. What he was talking about is somebody with Google who made a comment at a conference. What the Pulse was talking about was that we know that basically they came out and showed that we know that Daszak had funneled money and basically, if you look through, and one of the things we did in this commentary, and we'll get to the Google thing last, actually, because that's the way we did it in the commentary, and part of the reason we did it that way in the commentary was to just walk people through what happened in terms of authorities and COVID-19. And by authorities, we're really talking about, here, big science and the big media, and then of course big tech, which is the social media. But they hid and lied and tricked and fooled and did diversionary tactics to hide the truth from the American people. And we just walked through it. It started out with the World Health Organization buying into ridiculous things said by China, that there was no human-to-human transmission. Now, this was weeks after Taiwanese spies, they weren't necessarily spies, but in other words, Taiwanese in China had seen one of the things that they focus on is social media. And when they see somebody, saying something and other people arguing that's not so, they kind of pick up on it because they understand how the social media, the bamboo curtain, the firewall, the great Chinese firewall on the internet blocks what people are saying. So they were telling people early on. That's one reason we know how the Chinese were lying about what was happening. And the World Health Organization was right there with them to help them tell that lie. So that's the big government in China, and that's the big science worldwide lying to us. But of course, that wasn't enough. Big tech had to help them by censoring opinions. As we recall, all kinds of doctors who said things that big science didn't like were censored on YouTube. And of course, if you're trying to get a message out in this pandemic, YouTube's a pretty good place to do it. Doctors talking face to face with people. A lot of Americans don't read long science journal, medical journal articles all the time. And so that's a way that you could communicate and people could discuss and we could learn. But no, the CEO, and of course we talked about it at the time. This was a year ago, in fact, more than a year ago. Susan Wojcicki, I think that's not even close to her name, but it's as close as I'm going to get, I think. But she is the CEO of YouTube. And she basically came out and said, I'll just quote it, anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy and that's the end of her quote, meaning it'd be banned. You can't say it. They'll shut it down. So then we go on and we realize that you had arguably the most prestigious medical journal in the world print a letter by some of the most prestigious scientists in the world saying that this lab leak is all a big conspiracy theory. There's no evidence for that. There's all kinds of evidence, and every good scientist believes and prays to the God of science that basically this came from animals. And of course, this was also designed to say, hey, we trust the Chinese scientists. And let me tell you a little secret. I trust the Chinese scientists too. But I know what they know, which is that the CCP, the Chinazis, they have ways to convince scientists who are good, decent, wonderful people to lie so that they and their family aren't tortured or killed or imprisoned or beaten. So, this is silliness. This is gaslighting themselves or gaslighting us. Either way, gaslighting everybody. It's a big problem. So that's out there. And what happens? Of course, big media runs with it as absolute truth. And anyone who says anything else is talking about some debunked conspiracy theory. This is for over a year. And of course, I point out in this the obvious, which is why? Why would big media want to run with ridiculous lies? Why would they not even investigate to find out that the guy writing this prestigious letter in a prestigious journal is the very guy who got funding? His EcoHealth Alliance got funding from the National Institute of Health and funneled that money, hundreds of thousands, I believe it was $600,000 in recent times, and millions over the history, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So it's like, but our media didn't find out about it. Well, why not? Well, maybe because they're completely incompetent, worthless reporters and journalists, just completely incompetent. Or maybe it's because their narrative said Trump did it. And they don't think very highly of the American people and our ability to keep two thoughts in our head and chew gum and walk at the same time. And so they don't want to have, okay, Trump's bad and so is China. It's China's fault, but it's also Trump's fault. No, it's an election year. The Washington Post is the Democrats' number one super PAC. Oh, no. Maybe the New York Times is their number one super PAC. Maybe the Washington Post is just number two and they try harder. But of course, in an election year, they want to focus. So they ignore the lab leak for political reasons, because they are a political super PAC. They don't have to register with the FEC, but they are doing the work that geez, you wish any super PAC in favor of your candidate or your party or whatever was doing. So what's the other shoe? Well, let's say that you're with it and you understand, okay, big tech, these Facebook, I'm not going to get the information from Facebook. They're purposely hiding stuff, using DASAC as one of their advisors on what stories they should kill. I'm not going to be able to get it from the Washington Post and the New York Times. Big science isn't going to tell me the truth. I'm just going to Google until I find enough stories that will give me the truth, except we find out that David Feinberg, Dr. David Feinberg, who's the head of Google Health, was at a conference and was asked a question about blocking users from information on the virus's origin. And he owns up to the fact that, yes, indeed, they block that information from us. And he argued that Google did not want to, quote, lead people down pathways that we would not find to be authoritative information, end quote. So all of these authorities are deciding for us. We don't need the information. We cannot have it. We can't Google it. We can't talk about it with our friends on social media after they've sucked us in and taken all the pictures of our grandkids. We aren't going to be able to find out from any of our media people who are constantly digging to give us information, but only the information that serves their interests. And it's just, but what we get then is not authoritative information, because they won't give us that, but they will give us authoritative disinformation. And that's what we've been getting from all of these authorities, who are not, it's not like they're strangers. we so often, and we've had a number of different commentaries about it. But a lot of times what people will argue back is these are private, Google, Facebook, all these folks are private. They are in bed with the government. They are being purposely intimidated by members of Congress who haul them before committees, who write laws that specifically deal with how their businesses will be run. You don't think there's any control, any influence that comes with that kind of power? And then, of course, that doesn't even count the billions, maybe trillions, that has been transferred to do different programs, Google or Facebook or others. They all have government contracts. This is a really, I mean, it's happening. You see it happening on all kinds of different things. Now the new thing, which I think we'll probably have to talk about, is the extremists. They're going to tell, we all have to turn in our friends if they're extremists, or be told whether we're getting close to extremist content. But on this lab leak theory, and that's all it is a theory. No one's argued that, boy, they have the smoking gun. But of course, there's no smoking gun with the zoonotic, the animal to human transmission. There doesn't seem to be an animal that we can pinpoint, that scientists can pinpoint. And by golly, there's a bunch who'd sure like to be able to show that.
And they came out with the pangolin right away.
Yes.
Remember the pangolin? Yes. Most of us had to look it up because they couldn't remember what a pangolin looked like, because it's a pretty bizarre little animal.
Yes.
Well, they're not saying that anymore. They don't know that for sure.
The other thing is, I don't believe they've found the bats that have this particular strain.
I think they have found it related to the Wuhan lab. They collected the bats from the cave. They know the cave, but it's hard to verify anything because, who are you going to believe? Or as you put it, who are you going to trust?
Yeah.
One thing that YouTube won't trust is that they didn't trust Brett Weinstein this last few weeks. Brett Weinstein of the Dark Horse podcast. He's the former professor or whatever at Evergreen College that we were.
Oh, I thought that's who he was. Okay.
Yeah, well, he's been looking into the lab leak theory. He believes that he's well over 90% sure that it was made in a lab. And he's had many guests that are outside the norm, outside accepted opinion, and he's been not deplatformed, but his source of income off YouTube, he's been demonetized.
Yes, YouTube is doing this all the time, and there's one other key interest that they seem to be really constantly doing things to block and demonetize content that's anti-China. Almost every podcaster or YouTuber that I watch will say, our videos are regularly, please hit the like button. Our videos are regularly not being sent to people who've said they want them. They're regularly being demonetized. So it's, and people have complained about the same things when they post things on Facebook or other mediums like that. But especially Facebook, they don't seem to get the same number of hits when they criticize China as if they're writing something that's criticizing somebody else somewhere else. And I see the same sort of thing. We used to promote more of the commentaries on Facebook, and it just became so much trouble that anytime you say anything that's anti-politician, and I kind of do that a lot, it's difficult to get it through, and it's the same I find with, I don't believe I've ever gotten to promote a script that's anti-China, and Facebook is so screwed up in their advertising on that sort of thing that and that's even before the 2016 election, that you could easily believe, well, this is just they're just screwed up. But it does, it's kind of like a lot of things, just like the IRS thing. They would always, the IRS scandal where they blocked all these Tea Party groups from getting IRS status. And then they found a couple of liberal groups that were also blocked. And it was kind of like, well, yeah, they're blocking both sides, but it was not both sides. It was a tiny, a couple groups on one side and 100 plus on the other side. So, and it seems to be the same. I mean, you got to kind of follow your instincts when you see that your posts aren't getting the same kind of coverage. You hear YouTubers talking about it, other people talking about it. Big tech seems to not have the same problem with China that most people I know in America do. And back to America, it's good to know that we have amazing vanishing rights, or vanished rights, actually. Amazing Vanished Rights was our Wednesday commentary about the state of Idaho and the legislature there and the governor. I have not worked petitions in Idaho in over a decade, but it's a very, very difficult state. And when we were doing term limits there, of course, they constantly were looking for new ways to, try to repeal the term limits, which they did at one point, and also just to ruin the process so that we couldn't come back to reset the term limits. But that's not been enough. Some people have the resources and the wherewithal that they still come back. And so the legislature wants to stop that. And there's a new kind of, I think Republicans and libertarians, conservatives have oftentimes not appreciated democracy. And as I often say, for people who want to think that, democracy is voting on everything all the time, none of the people I know, even on the left, who talk about democracy, I shouldn't say none, because there are a couple of lunatics, but other than them, everybody realizes you have to have protection from the majority, and you have to have minority rights, which are individual rights. That's the ultimate minority. And we argue about that. It doesn't mean some places they aren't going to say certain things that we think are rights aren't rights. A lot of the world doesn't provide the same sort of rights. Gay marriage is something that you have a few, mostly in the West. You have very few countries in Africa or Asia who allow that or who would see that as part of people's rights. So we grow in that sort of thing. But here's the thing in Idaho, and really I took this off of a column that somebody wrote that I thought was really strong, talking about, wait a second, and quoting some of the people with Reclaim Idaho who have challenged this law in court. What they did in Idaho, you had to get 6% of the registered voters in 18 of 35 Senate districts. Very, very difficult. It turns out to be 16 petition drives, and you have to succeed in every one or you're finished. So that takes a little extra, and then it means going throughout the state. They changed that to 35 of 35. So you got to get every single one. So that is 35 petition drives. If you're successful in 34 out of 35, you lose. Makes it extremely difficult. But of course, the language in the Constitution of the state of Idaho, and in almost every state, especially that has the initiative of a referendum, but even in the other states, they talk about all the power being with the people. Well, is that just BS? I mean, is that just a throwaway line that nobody really believes? Increasingly, I hear people, Republicans in a lot of these states that have been Republican now for a while, that the legislature, in a republic, only the legislature is able to make any decision. It's somehow wrong for we the people to do it. And of course, I understand that one of the biggest problems they have is that a number of Republican legislatures, state legislatures, held out against expanding Medicaid, which is a huge drag on the budget. And of course, the federal government's promising to pay 90%, but not forever. And so it's a way to suck people into more spending. And, a lot of conservatives were really glad, I was too, that Republican legislatures were wise enough to say, no, we're not doing that. And a number of them expanded their programs in the state, but didn't buy into the Medicaid expansion. And I think they were wise not to. Unfortunately, giving away goodies is often popular, and they put the expansion of Medicaid onto the ballot in a number of states: Idaho, Arkansas, my former home state, where I grew up, and the people passed them. Well, I think the people were mistaken. Now, I could argue that from now on, the people never get to vote again, and that's what some people are arguing. I don't think that's the next step that we should take. I think instead we have to educate people on why that's not a smart vote. That's what's behind a lot of this. A republic demands that it be representative. Well, they don't represent us. That's not representative. And a republic, you can vote directly and it still be a republic. And really the biggest sign of a republic traditionally is having some constitutional Republican limits on government. That's the key. And one of those limits is a check on the power of the legislature. Very few initiatives are passing. Nobody's running any state by the initiative. These legislators have so much power. And in fact, in Idaho, and we wrote a previous commentary a couple of years ago, in Idaho, the initiative process is only statutory. And there's no real prohibition against the legislature, after you pass it, repealing it immediately. So from a power dynamic, the Idaho legislature could let people pass initiatives all day long and just repeal them as soon as they pass them. But see, that's messy. That shows the lie of them being representative. They want to shut down the speech. They don't want to, even if it's just that people know everybody's for this and the legislature blocked it. They're not trying to keep their power. They're trying to silence the public so that they can keep their power in a more long-term way. And the idea that somehow the essence of American freedom is all built on stiff-arming the public and keeping them away because our wise legislatures will always do the right thing. It might be true in one or two cases, but man, that's scary thinking in my book.
I should mention that the piece, Amazing Vanished Rights, starts with a kind of a philosophical argument that when we first sent it to me, I was a little nonplussed because it's a little different. It's a different kind of argument than you usually make. But then I realized I really agree with this philosophical point, but we shouldn't talk about it because that people should go to read it. They should read it at thisiscommonsense.org.
Yes, Amazing Vanished Rights at thisiscommonsense.org. And so let's go on to the stars. A little fun here, a little lighthearted slavery.
Yeah, looking at it.
Well, it's funny because, I always see celebrity news as kind of not really news. And, just because I'm not so interested. But of course, we've got two stories that we put together. Bill Cosby being released from prison after 3 years, convicted of, the aggravated indecent assault. The whole trial was he was drugging women and having sex with them, which seems to me to be rape. But of course, it's difficult to prove that. And here's something that they did get a jury to say you're guilty on. And it looks as though, from a legal standpoint, the prosecutor had made certain commitments. The judges come back and say, wait a second, this shouldn't have been entered in. And in fact, the whole case is something that the prosecutor's office should not have brought under the law. I don't think that they were suggesting in any way, shape, or form that Bill Cosby's innocent. And of course, he tweeted something out about he's always maintained his innocence. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of people who've always maintained their innocence, and we don't necessarily believe them. But anyway, that really was not the point of the piece, because my read of that situation is, one, I haven't read very much about it because it's not really something that I think it affects everybody. It's a celebrity who did things that appear to me to be very bad, and I think he is guilty from what little I've heard. But boy, I sure wouldn't want to be on a jury with what I know and making any decision because I don't know enough. But my sense is legally it was the right decision, but reality-wise, the jury was right that he was guilty of that crime. And those are two different questions sometimes, unfortunately. As we say in the piece, sometimes the guilty go free. But the Princess of Pop is not free. And the whole conservatorship of Britney Spears has been in the news. And it just seems, she's kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen an interview with her. She's not someone who you're wowed by their intellectual or, acumen, their economic acumen, she's a singer and a dancer, and she seems to be awfully good at that, and has made quite a living. But many years ago, her father got control of her life, of her money. She's worth, I guess, $60 million. She gets $2,000 a week, which ain't bad. But hey, if I made $60 million and someone was saying, "Hey, I'll give you $2,000 a week," I'd say, "Hey, wait, that's my money." Now, after we wrote this, and after I guess this has been out some, I've heard people talk about the fact that her attorney, court-appointed attorney, and her before this, I don't think she was going to draft up the papers herself, but that they haven't actually filed something to end the conservatorship. That's kind of a big deal because the court can't do it if nobody files anything. And they threw this out, and I think this attorney who was court-appointed may be in a little bit of hot water for not kind of doing his job. But the bottom line is this: it seems like, we're constantly talking about, we have a right to do this and rights, and then we see someone who, no matter what, it seems to me she's an adult person, unless she can be shown to really be intellectually, mentally incompetent, that, she's living as something of a slave. And to the degree that she's not allowed to get married, she is required, and this is even worse, I think, required to take birth control pills.
That was an IUD.
Oh, it is an IUD.
Yeah.
But that just seems to me to be something that nobody has a right to tell somebody else they have to do. And and I do understand that this is not the easiest case in the world. I suspect that she could make an awful lot of bad decisions. And so that's a big concern. At the same time, I could make an awful lot of bad decisions. Somebody else could, but we don't want anyone we don't want a SWAT team storming in to go, "Hey, we think you were on the verge of making some bad decisions, so we now have taken control of everything you own."
It gets weirder, though. I mean, she's forced to work, basically. I mean, not only is she not allowed to, get pregnant or get married or hire her own attorney for once. She can't hire an attorney. That is, the conservatorship determines what the attorney is. That's one of the things that
yes.
makes that story that you told a little bit more ominous. No wonder it's a court-appointed attorney and didn't do the job.
Right.
I mean, notoriously bad at that.
Right.
And her father, who started it all, was in charge of her career. She wasn't allowed to fail, in a sense. I mean, she might have failed after 2008 when her last big hit was, I think, or something like that.
Right.
I mean, she might have. She might have gone on a drunken stupor. I don't know what she was up to when she was apparently failing, but it's just so weird to have somebody else control of your career and directing it, and you're forced to work, and they get lots of money from it.
Right. Right.
I mean, this is a really strange story. I mean, my interest in Britney Spears beyond that is like almost zero. I love music, but not. I don't really love Britney Spears music.
That's not your top genre.
No, it's probably one of my least favorite genre. It's above rap, all of hip hop, but it's still pretty low on my.
I like the genre of rap and hip hop, but I've only found like 2 or 3 songs within the genre that I like.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
I think that's funny because it's like, if someone said, well, do you like rap? I'd probably say no, but it's not really true. The actual style, I kind of do really like. I think it's neat. I think it's fun. But and I've been told by people who've done it some, that one of the reasons they use so many bad words is because you got to keep this like pacing up. And so you need words to throw in sometimes. Well, what's going to be any more exciting than just throwing in the F word and the S word and the B word and so anyway, it's funny that there are some hip hop songs I like and some rap songs I like, but it's like I can't even really go. I surf all the time trying to find new music. I can't surf those songs to find new music. No. After a couple songs where they're saying things that I find fairly disturbing, I've become disinterested in further investigation.
I think it's stylistically gotten better over the years, but the repellent nature of the lyrics is hard for me. But one of my favorite movies is imbued with rap, and it's made and it's by the RCA. I think it's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai. One of my favorite movies of all time. It's a weird Jim Jarmusch film that's starring Forrest Whitaker. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't. Forrest Whitaker's a very interesting actor.
Oh, he the greatest lazy eye in cinema. And I really do like the movie, and it's a really interesting, laid-back crime movie.
You got to tell me the name of the movie again so I can write it down.
It's Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai. I believe it's on Criterion Channel right now. So it's Criterion Channel circulates stuff through like most of the smaller channels do, and it's on there, or was the last I checked, and I love that film, and there's a lot of rap in it. And for some reason, it works in that movie. But RZA did the music, and he did it to combine rap and an Asian feel, because Forrest Whitaker's character is a man who's lived his life by a code of the samurai that he picks up in paperbacks. I think it's just magnificent. Anyway, that has nothing to do with Britney Spears.
On Tuesday, the piece Authoritative at thisiscommonsense.org talked about the whole Wuhan thing, but in a footnote, it mentioned that the information about what the Google guy had said, I had found out through a little bit on Tucker Carlson. And someone on Facebook, I think it was, said, oh, Tucker Carlson, blah, blah, blah. And, who would believe him? And it's interesting. Our Trust the Spies, Friday's piece, is about Tucker Carlson coming out and saying the NSA is reading my emails and my texts, and that someone had contacted them, their show, him personally, or the show somehow had gotten to him, and supposedly this is a government official. They've checked it out. It's believable, although a lot of people don't believe Tucker. And I'm not sure I believe him too much here, because he comes out and says this, and then the NSA comes out and says, what were their exact words? This allegation is untrue, which seems to me to be clear enough. This allegation is untrue. Sounds like they denied it. Well, he comes out and says, that they didn't deny it. Well, I have a real job, at least most of the time, and so I don't have the ability to like just read and watch TV all the time, and so I hadn't heard anything. So he comes out the next day and he says, they issued a denial that's no denial at all, and he quoted from their denial, and what he quoted was very legalistic stuff that just struck me as not much of a denial either. I found a quote from Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida, saying this denial is no real denial. Then I read the actual denial, and in there they quote part of what Tucker said, and they say this allegation is untrue. Those are the exact words they say. Now that's a denial. I just fell off the turnip truck, but let me tell you, that's a denial. So it's sad that, you can say, look, I have good information. I don't believe your denial. And that was the point that I'm trying to make in this piece, is that, we don't necessarily believe Tucker. Maybe he got hoodwinked. Maybe he's innocent. Somebody called and punked him. They said they were from the NSA. Maybe he's just made it up. But he's saying it, and the NSA is saying it's not so. And who do you believe? Well, I know that when the director of national intelligence was before Congress in 2013 and was asked by Senator Ron Wyden, does the NSA collect any data at all on millions of Americans? And Clapper lied and said no, not wittingly, meaning only by accident. But that was a lie. And it wasn't a tiny lie. It wasn't that 2 or 3 times somebody grabbed some information that they weren't supposed to grab. It's that they were sweeping up every bank record, every email we'd sent, every phone call we'd ever made. And I happen to think they've got recordings of those phone calls. But maybe not. Maybe they just have every phone call we made. But of course, Joe Biden in 2006 pointed out, if they've got every phone call you made, they can pretty much figure out what you're up to. And he went on to say, are we going to trust the president and vice president of the United States that they're doing the right thing? Don't count me in on that. So first of all, let me just say that once upon a time, Joe Biden had some sense going on in his head, because he looks at this and goes, hey, come on, give me a break. You can't let the president and the vice president of the United States grab stuff on everybody and say, oh, we're going to be good with it, or the intelligence agencies or the deep state, whatever you want to call them. You can't allow them to do that. And of course, they've lied before. So Tucker Carlson says in his piece on this, quote, the NSA does routinely spy on Americans. It won't call it spying. That's exactly what it is. Millions of Americans, not just a couple. And sometimes it does it for political reasons. And everyone knows this. Everyone. And of course, we kind of debated how to end this piece, but I ended by saying, but many still deny it. And of course, I was somewhat concerned that people might think that I'm saying Tucker's right, the NSA. I don't know what happened in this case, but Tucker's right about this general thrust that they've done it before. Is there any reason to believe they won't do it again? They didn't have any authorization before. There's nothing in the law that said they could do this. In fact, it seemed to say they couldn't, and they just expanded it to be able to do it whenever they felt like. And other people I know have sometimes said, well, okay, they grab all this info, but can they really can they churn it around and manipulate it and so on to really go after everybody? Well, not everybody, just people who are political threats. So this is serious stuff. And interestingly enough, in doing this piece, you told me, boy, this is just, our thought of the day is like, and I don't know if you had planned to do it the same day or when we were going to do that thought, but it just, what a great thought. And we should put this up on the screen, but it's Elena. I haven't actually said her name out loud.
Gorokova. I thought it was actually a Solzhenitsyn quote. It came to me a few months ago as something that Alexander Solzhenitsyn said. And maybe he did somewhere, but I couldn't find him saying it. What I found was Elena Gorokova saying it.
Well, of course, if you look online long enough, Abraham Lincoln has said it at one time or another. But
the line is good. It's the rules are simple, describing the rules in the Soviet Union. This is a memoir about the Soviet Union. They lie to us. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, but they keep lying anyway. And we keep pretending to believe them. That's a corrupt and dangerous society where you have that going on. And I think that's what's happening in America.
Yeah. It's, one of the things I find interesting about this too is that when Snowden's, and of course Snowden just turned 36 or 37. I hope he's not going to be in Russia forever and gets to come home. He should. Excuse me. He should be pardoned. And if you can see in my background, if go to thisiscommonsense.org and you can find our Edward Snowden poster. One will look great on your wall. But now I'm going to lose my train of thought as to where I was headed with Mr. Snowden on this.
Well, I don't know where you were going.
Okay. I know. I do now. Remember where I was going. When Snowden broke everything, so many people I know said, well, we already knew this. And of course, that was true in a sense. We already suspected it and strongly suspected it, maybe. But we didn't quite know. And so I think what Snowden did was so incredibly valuable because now the government can't deny it. It can't say we're crazy. It can't say we're just conspiracy theorists. We know it's true. We know it happened. They had to admit it. And that was huge. And for that, I think we all owe Edward Snowden one hell of a debt. But we're kind of in the same place on a lot of this as we go forward and don't have, someone like Edward Snowden can't just, give us information every day to disprove the latest lie. We have to try to find our way. And we have to realize that it is easy for us to get pulled along by what's printed in the Washington Post and then what's said on NBC Nightly News and then what's, said on social media and what's blocked because, well, that's been debunked and so on. It's easy for us to pretend that we don't know what's going on. And of course, we don't know 100% of everything that's going on. But what do we know? We know that all the authoritative parts of big government have lied to us. We know that big tech outside of big government in the big private sector that is kind of right there in bed with government, that they don't seem to be worried that they're displeasing their customers. They're very worried that they're not pleasing the Congress, the Democrats who keep threatening them, the Republicans who are upset with them, the CCP that might be upset with them from time to time if they're not, not towing the line. We have got to realize, as a friend of mine says, we're behind enemy lines. And that may or may not be true. You can look at it different ways. The bottom line is and maybe we were being lied to all the time. I think we know we were being lied to a lot of the time, 20, 30, 40 years ago, forever. That's what government does, maybe. But we are in a new situation where our ability to communicate with each other that seems so magic as we got the internet and smartphones and we saw the Arab Spring and we realized this could be used for people all over the world in these despotic, horrible regimes to connect with each other and to throw off their oppressors. And now it seems more and more to be a tool of authoritarian government. And it seems that our government is flirting with the same sorts of controls and attitudes that we see from the Chinazis and abhor. And we've got serious work to do. It's like I'm getting older, and it's like I don't ever really want to retire and mosey off into the sunset, but I would like things to get a little easier, and I've now determined that's not going to happen. but I'd like to leave this realm feeling like there's a chance for freedom. And I think we are in so much tougher shape than I thought years ago we were in. And I think we got a lot of work to do, which is good, because I didn't want in the next 10, 20 years, didn't want to run out of stuff to do.
Well, there's the bright side. You can't retire.
That's the good news.
Well, we're retiring from this podcast, and we should say something about, again, thisiscommonsense.org. That's where you can find the pieces that you write 5 days a week. You can get them on PDFs. You can share them on PDFs. There's more besides just what you write. There's this podcast on the weekend. We're going to have a special podcast coming up probably early in the week, next week. So there are things to do at thisiscommonsense.org.
Yes, and one of the things that happens every day, and not just Monday through Friday, 7 days a week, is the thought of the day, where we take a quote that somebody has made that we think is important, and we put it out there, and it's easily shareable on social media. And then we also have today in history and in freedom, and look at history, what happened on this day, from the lens of, hey, we like freedom and don't like tyrants.
Yeah, today's I liked was the Lee resolution. We had the Lee resolution today. This is July 2nd. The day before, we had a case of a man who was, this is awful. He was burnt at the stake in France.
Let me read it, and you should put this up on the screen. On July 1, 1766, Francois Jean de la Barre, I'm not even close.
Francois Jean de la Barre, right?
Oh, there you go. See, that sounds so much better. You should read it, actually. But a young French nobleman was tortured and beheaded before his body was burnt on a pyre, along with a copy of Voltaire's Dictionnaire Philosophique.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Nailed to his torso for the crime of not saluting a religious procession in Abbeville, France. Not saluting a religious procession. And you think about this. This was 10 years before the shot that was heard around the world, before Lexington and Concord, and 20 years before the Bill of Rights, maybe a little bit more, was passed, and we had religious freedom. But my goodness, and you think of the French Revolution, and you think of how violent and terrible it was in the aftermath. Well, things like this happen, and you can kind of see why. It again, it's like, and I think we mistake the level of violence that was part of the American Revolution. A third of the people in the country left after the Revolution. In other words, they didn't feel safe, and golly gee whiz, this is a wonderful place anymore. The Tories tended to leave. So these revolutions and so on are not always pretty. But wow.
That tyranny wasn't pretty either. The Ancien regime was quite nasty, and it had to go, and it did go. And the early days of the revolution weren't as bad as the later days. I actually have a theory about that. I've written about this. Is that I have the theory that I think we kind of know why the revolution really went and spiraled out of control, and it's something that we're going to be experiencing very closely ourselves very soon. It was inflation. It was the assignat inflation that really ruined the French Revolution, I think, because at that point it destroyed the moral capital along with the actual capital of the masses, because the people who are most hurt by inflation are the poor. And the poor became part of the nasty revolution and demanding all these executions, and just got really ugly. And I think it was just the assignat revolution, inflation. And that's my theory. I've never heard anyone say it, and maybe I'm wrong, but and maybe when I read the Will and Ariel grant, I'll find out that there's a better explanation. And of course,
I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons why something like that happened.
I didn't think it could have happened without the inflation.
It's kind of ugly in the sense that sometimes, you have to push a government, but the more you push them, the more vicious they are. And in essence, the closer you get to change, the more vicious they are. So it's, and then if they're vicious enough, as it's overturned, there's kind of reciprocal viciousness. So,
yeah, that's one of the things we're witnessing now is
hopefully those are fireworks outside and not gunshots. But
okay, yeah. Well, we are approaching July 4th.
Yes, no, I'm sure it's or they've taken out most of the neighborhood. I really like my neighbors. Happy Independence Day to everyone, July 4th. But I really think we should call it Independence Day and maybe appreciate being independent individually and as a country.